Tonight on Business Live, President Kojo Backah appeals to Parliament to pass outstanding tax bills needed to secure a $3 billion program from the International Monetary Fund. We have details from the State of the Nation address.
Income tax amendment bill, the excise duty and excise tax stamp amendment bills, as well as the growth and sustainability levy bill are outstanding, which need the urgent attention of the House and passage to complete the prior actions.
How expedient must the passage of these bills and levies be in our quest to secure an IMF program? We shall be getting answers from economist and lecturer at the University of Ghana Business School, Professor Priscilla Baffo, on that. Also in this bulletin, as the world marks International Women's Day, stakeholders have been urged to support women entrepreneurs, use digital platforms to expand the operations.
One of the biggest things we need to do to ensure that more women are in the technology space is we need to make, very simply, we need to make internet affordable and accessible, right? We need, and part of the conversation is 1 gigabyte of data should not be more than 1% of the average salary in a country. Otherwise, you are not helping anybody.
Grateful you could stay with us. I am Pious Kojo Backah. On to our very first story. President Kojo Backah has made an appeal to Parliament to pass a number of tax bills to enable the country complete processes for an economic bailout from the International Monetary Fund. Ghana is seeking about $3 billion balance of payment support from the IMF. Now, the country is currently undergoing processes to restructure its external debt stock with international creditors, basically. Now, but speaking in Parliament during the State of the Nation address a while ago, President Kojo Backah said some outstanding tax collection bills are needed to be passed urgently to secure an IMF program.
Having reached a staff-level agreement on 12 December 2022, after 5 months of intense negotiations and completion of most of the prior actions required under the agreement, we are on course for the IMF staff to present to the IMF Executive Board Ghana's program request for a $3 billion extended credit facility by the end of this month. Mr. Speaker, the 3-year IMF program, anchored on government's post-COVID-19 program for economic growth, aims at restoring macroeconomic stability and debt sustainability whilst protecting the vulnerable. It is a strong reform program which relies on front-loaded fiscal measures to increase domestic resource mobilization and streamline public expenditures to support inclusive growth and enhance social protection. Mr. Speaker, I thank the House for its support throughout this process, including the passage of key revenue laws. However, a few more of these measures, namely the Income Tax Amendment Bill, the Excise Duty and Excise Tax Stamp Amendment Bills, as well as the Growth and Sustainability Levy Bill, are outstanding, which need the urgent attention of the House and passage to complete the prior actions. This will put us in readiness for our presentation to the Fund Board, and more importantly, bolster our domestic revenue mobilization efforts.
So that's President Kojo Backah speaking at Parliament a while ago. But let's get better appreciation of all of these. And joining us is economist and a senior lecturer at the University of Ghana Business School, Dr. Priscilla Baffo for more on this. Grateful you could join us, Doctor, for joining us basically on Business Live. Now, is the President's statement reassuring enough to bring investor confidence into the economy?
Thank you very much, and good evening to your cherished viewers and listeners. My designation, I'm actually at the Department of Economics, not the Business School.
Great.
But indeed, so when you look at the President's State of the Nation address, he sought to take the people of Ghana on a journey. And in this journey, you can tell that he placed a lot of emphasis on historical background. That is where we have come from, where we are now, and possibly where we are going, he indicated clearly. And in that sense, you can tell that the president wanted to remind the average Ghanaian of what his government had done. And so you can tell that there was a lot of emphasis on pre-COVID economic indicators, which indicate, so when you look at the pattern of all these indicators, you can tell that COVID and the war in Eastern Europe are all these issues that have led to where we are. And so for that matter, you can tell that the president, and that is what he sought to do, and he achieved it. As to whether the message inspired a lot of hope, I believe that it's left to the average Ghanaian, because you can speak so much about where we've come from, and people are actually experiencing the current situation. And when you look at the other trajectory too, you see that the president wants us to appreciate the many blessings we have. So for example, he speaks about the fact that we are not queuing for petrol and essential commodities as we've seen elsewhere. And so in all this, I think that in the grand scheme of things, his government has received a lot of bashing in recent times, particularly on the fact that this is a government that was quite vociferous about the fact that it was not going to go for an IMF deal. And now we are undergoing a debt restructuring and asking for debt forgiveness and somehow debt suspension to be able to get an agreement, which in the first place we were indicating we were not going to go for. So in all, you can tell that the president really today started from a difficult place, but in terms of the position of the speech, you can tell that he sought to let us remember his achievements, although the reality is that those achievements are not reflecting in the current economic situations that we find the country.
Great. So would you say that we are on course in meeting our March deadline, especially at a time when we do know that our engagement with the Chinese investors hangs in the balance?
I believe that essentially external debt restructuring is critical for the country to get a board level program in terms of what the status of the country, where it's going now. And when you look at all the indicators with the engagement with the Paris Club, the president appealing to other members of the Paris Club to also come on board. The elephant in the room has been what would be the Chinese position, because significantly they own a chunk of our external debts. And so it is important that we are able to get some sort of commitment for our external debtors to come out with a statement to support us so that the government, the country gets on board an IMF program. And within this, the president also acknowledges that indeed fiscal reforms and structural reforms are not enough. And then when you look at it, you can tell that that is why he's also pushing for essentially the passage of these tax bills to be able to increase our revenue mobilization in the country. But for me, I think that what was missing in the president's speech, which he indicated, it's sort of an admission of the fact that, yes, government also needs to take some responsibility with regards to where the nation is at the moment. And I don't think I found that in the speech overall.
Now, the other issue is, of course, the expediency we need to attach to the passage of the bills and what have you, so that we can easily get the IMF bailout. From where you said, how expedient should Parliament be in this regard?
I believe that at this point in time, we should put Ghana first and set the politics aside a bit. And in that regard, we should look at the bigger picture and see what the country stands to gain in terms of passage of all these. It's important that as a country, we work seriously towards revenue mobilization, because the base of our revenue mobilization is very weak, and consistently we have been underperforming. I mean, you look at our tax to GDP ratio, we're doing in the range of 14 to 15%, which is woefully inadequate based on all the numerous expenditure outlays, whether be it mandatory expenditures or being a discretionary expenditures. So indeed, something must be done. And it is evident the country needs to show that, yes, once it gets on board, what the IMF requires is for us to be able to show that once we get this support, we have the capacity to dig ourselves out of whatever precarious situation we are in currently. And showing a good revenue handle is one thing that could go a long way. In addition to also the fact that the country has managed to make some significant success with respect to the domestic debt restructuring. I mean, the president mentions it, being able to achieve 85% participation rate is something that is quite commendable, although, I mean, nobody expected this kind of discussion for the country to be in this particular position, given where we've come from, particularly looking at pre-COVID levels.
Indeed, we are grateful for your time, Dr. Priscilla Bafochumesi, for your time here on Business Live, helping us understand basically what it means by way of presentation made by President Akufo-Addo during his State of the Nation address. We shall certainly keep you posted on other stories we have for you in relation to that basically. Let's move on to some other stories we have for you. Founder of Women in Tech Africa, Ethel Kofi, has underscored the need to promote inclusion of women in the digital and technological drive. According to her, technological tools such as smartphones and access to the internet must be made affordable to women to help them come out with innovations that would aid in economic transformation. She's been speaking to Joy Business.
The National Women's Summit and Expo celebrated its 5th anniversary in line with the International Women's Day celebration. The discussion was focused on promoting the inclusivity of women in the digital and technological drive. Speaking in an interview, founder of Women in Tech Africa, Ethel Kofi, said access to internet and technological tools need to be made affordable for the Ghanaian woman.
One of the biggest things we need to do to ensure that more women are in the technology space is we need to make, very simply, we need to make internet affordable and accessible, right? We need, and part of the conversation is 1 gigabyte of data should not be more than 1% of the average salary in a country. Otherwise, you are not helping anybody, right? And then access to things, the price, affordability of smartphones. The cheaper it is for people to be able to buy smartphones, the more they can do with them. And so for me, in order to create inclusivity for women in digital, you need people to be able to access the internet and smartphones cheaply. Government has started the journey of helping support more women in digital. I think there's work to be done in our ICT policy to be more inclusive for women. And hopefully there's a conversation right now about updating the ICT policy, and hopefully that will be included in it.
A reminder, you're still watching Business Live here on the Joy News channel with me, Pious Kojo Backah. Still to come, the Joy Business Van tells the story of 2 entrepreneurs who are adding value to plantains. And that's it for Business Live for tonight. I am Pious Kojo Backah. You can always get stories when you log on to myjoyonline.com/business. Pleasure serving you to enjoy the rest of our programs.